Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this video on CICs. So we're going to look at CICs today from a basic point of view. They are a different business structure. Okay, so we obviously have our sole traders, partnerships, limited companies, and charities. So this is a in between of a limited company and a charity, basically. But it's very different structure to a charity, okay? And I'm going to go over that in a little bit more detail later. But first, we're going to start off with what a CIC actually is. So it's a special form of non-charitable limited company. Okay, so it is still a limited company, but it's for the purpose of the community, or for social reasons. Okay, so what we mean by that is that when we make any profit, okay, that profit and the money will stay within the business. It's not then distributed out to shareholders. There are different structures, but that's sort of a basic way of explaining it. So it is for the purpose of the community, and anything you do within that company is for the purpose of the community rather than for the purpose of shareholders and making them money. Okay, it is exclusively for the community and for a social purpose. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. And what we need, well, there's two different ways of setting up a CIC. There's two different structures. One is a CIC limited by guarantee, and the other is a CIC limited by shares. With a CIC that is limited by guarantee, if they're limited by guarantee, they have no share capital and therefore cannot pay out any dividends. Okay, the owners agreed to meet the company's debts up to a specific limit if it was going to fail. Okay, beyond that, they have no further liability for the company's debts. With a CIC that is limited by shares, the company will have a certain amount of capital, which is divided into a number of shares. Okay, and then once the shareholder has paid the full nominal value of those shares, there's no other liabilities. Okay, so if it is a company that is limited by shares, you will have shareholders and you can pay dividends to those shareholders. Okay, but it is limited up to 35% of profits. Okay, so that's all that can be distributed to a shareholder if it's a CIC that is limited by shares. Okay, so that 35% limit is there if it is a CIC that is limited by shares. Okay, the remaining 65% of profits must then go back into the company and then be used for the community or used for social purposes. Okay, so that's the difference between the limited by guarantee and the limited by shares. So with the CIC, they are less regulated than a charity, but they are more regulated than the limited company. So when you're setting up your CIC, there's a certain amount of things that you have to do. Okay, the first thing that you need to do is a community interest statement. And this just explains your business plans and what you're going to be doing. Okay, this will all be checked by Revenue and Customs and Companies House. The next thing that you'll need is an asset lock. This is a legal promise stating that the company's assets will only be used for social objectives, and then setting limits to the money it can pay to shareholders. Okay, the next thing is a constitution. You can find a model constitution on the HMRC website. And then the last thing that you need is to have your CIC approved by a community interest regulator. Okay, so when you do your application on the government website, your application goes through to a regulator anyway. So that's when they're doing their checks to make sure that the company is community based. So that the really important thing here for a CIC is that you're doing it for the greater good and for the community. Okay, it's not something that you're doing just for your own purposes, okay, and for yourself to make money, because that's not what a CIC is. Okay, so it's something that is for the wider community, like sports clubs, voluntary groups, people that don't plan on making a profit, and anything that they do make is just kept within that company and used over and over again. Okay, that is the purpose of a CIC. So a really big question that I get a lot of the time with the CIC is, can I pay myself a wage as a director? And the answer is yes. So you yourself as a director of a CIC can be on the payroll, so you can pay yourself. You can have employees on the payroll as well. But you have to, when you're deciding on the pay that you're going to give yourself, it has to be a fair amount. So when you do your reporting at the end of the year to Revenue and Customs and Companies House, you have to declare how much directors' pay there's been. And this is just to make sure that the director isn't taking out too much money, and that the community interest tests are met. So it has to be an amount that is relevant to or fair to the amount of work that you do as such, or fair to the CIC. So if you did, I don't know, 1 day's worth of work and then we're taking 10 grand of salary out, that obviously isn't the idea of it. Okay, so that's what we mean by it has to be a fair wage, okay, if you're a director, because that is something that will be looked at by the regulators when they look at your end of year reports. Another area that gets spoken about quite a lot is tax. So with ACIC, you still have to pay corporation tax, okay, you're still within those rules of paying corporation tax. So for instance, I've got a client who does food banks, they're a CIC. They obviously thought when they did the whole CIC thing that it was a charitable thing to do, and when I obviously came along and said that they still had to pay tax because they're not actually a charity, that was a shock. So there's a very thin line with a CIC as to what might be seen as a sort of a non-trading activity. So a lot of what you do with a CIC, even though it is for the community, it is still seen as trading. So just be aware that unless it is something that you think should be a charity, you will have to pay tax on your profits, okay? So please don't think that just because it's seen as a community company that you will be exempt from paying corporation tax, because you probably won't be. Okay, so just please do be aware of that. With regards to VAT as well, if you go up to the VAT threshold of 85,000, you will still be required to register for VAT as well. With CICs and with the CICs that I've worked with, I do know that from a positive point of view, you do tend to receive a little bit more funding, a little bit more grants that might be available. So from that point of view, it is a good way of sort of getting that money in from councils, as long as you obviously go through all of the correct paperwork and that you're eligible for it. So but I found that a lot of my CIC clients find it a lot easier to receive funding than what they would have if they were a limited company or a sole trader. So I think my conclusion to this is, if it is something that you feel is going to be of benefit to your local community, if it's something that you have in mind that has a social purpose, and if it's something that you yourself don't particularly want to make any money out of, then a CIC is a good idea. However, with the tax, corporation tax issues, in that you still pay corporation tax, you still go towards the VAT threshold. Is there really a clear sort of reason for opening CIC? I think that's what I'm trying to say. You really have to look at the options and what will be good for you. Obviously, from a grants point of view, like I said, I think a CIC would probably be better. All of the councils seem to love a CIC for that at the moment, but if it comes down to it, that there's a lot more paperwork for CIC than a limited company. So I think if it's something that you're thinking about, it would be a sort of a pros and a cons list for each of the limited company, CIC, and then a charity, because they're different structures, and I think you need to really figure out what it is that you want from that business, and then yeah, that's definitely the first place to start. So if you need any help with any of this, then please do pop a message to me, and I will be more than happy to help you. I hope this video has been fairly helpful. Obviously, a CIC is sort of I wouldn't say it's new and up and coming, but it's just it has been around, but it's not something that's really come into place until, or people haven't really known about it until recently. So, but it is another option. And like I said, if you have any questions at all, then please do let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you click subscribe. Thank you. Goodbye.